Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Lance and Katie, good to see you both. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. Lance, good to see you. Good job yesterday on that webinar, by the way.
It was a fun one. Business acquisition loans are really important to all SBA lenders, and we got a chance to talk about it yesterday.
Yeah, it was very good. Hey, let's get to the poll questions. Number one, have you received forgiveness on a PPP loan over $2 million? Probably should have been more specific. Have you applied for forgiveness on a PPP loan? Lance, we were going through the numbers yesterday, and there's 500 loans available. There you go, 16%.
There's a few, yeah.
Which is new. Last time I think we did this, Katie, we were at fat finger 1%.
Yeah, I think we've maybe received a 1, maybe at 2%, and we've heard rumors that some are getting through the system, but I definitely don't think it's the majority, so this doesn't surprise me too much. 16 is maybe a little higher than I expected, but
yeah, which is
that's
I'm glad
definitely a good sign.
Number two, go ahead, Lance.
It's a great sign that they're finally processing those, because it's just like any category, Bob. They're not all buying Ferraris. There's some good, upstanding small businesses that got PPP loans that need forgiveness in that group.
Good citizens.
Yes.
Borrowers are ineligible for PPP lending if they are presently involved in a bankruptcy. Seems common sense, Lance.
Well, and I would, everybody got this correct, Bob, but PPP kind of made many of us shake in our boots a little bit. Some of the categories that they've let us provide PPP loans, as an example, Bob, churches, people who defaulted on student debt. So at least this is one category where they're not eligible.
Yeah, and I think we have to remember the purpose of this is for employment. And when you have a bankruptcy, there's a lot of, especially in our smaller corner of the world, bankruptcy equals out of business. So I think that's, unfortunately, lenders are getting, the lender says, hey, I'm not going to touch it. They get involved in litigation. That's an interesting question, Lance. If you get sued as a lender on a PPP, does SBA kick in, or is the lenders on its own dime?
So you're saying that PPP borrower sues the bank?
Yeah, an applicant, and the bank says, no, I'm not gonna lend it to you, and then you get sued.
I don't know that the SBA is going to provide legal support in that situation, but it's I think the bank probably will be flying solo in that circumstance, Bob.
And I know there were issues, and those quickly got thrown out of court, so it's just the cost of doing business. Hey, Mr. Sexton, what is the most common reason for a guaranteed denial with a SBA 7A business acquisition loan?
You know, this is a great question, Bob, and especially I'll wait and see the answers. But
very good. You're getting trained now, Lance.
I was going to say 1, 2, and 3. They're all reasons for guaranteed denial. Probably the most common issues, equity injections, probably the most prevalent. So 40% of you are right on the money, but eligibility is a great answer too, Bob. If you don't meet the business acquisition eligibility requirements, you'll have a guaranteed denial. Projections and underwriting also has become more important over the last couple years, with the Inspector General asking participant lenders to take a closer look and make sure those projections make sense. Make sure they have a good summary of assumptions to those projections.
And we got guidance on that, said, hey, COVID-19, you need to address that in the credit memo. That's not a specific projection, but they want to address it. 2 questions that came out of that, Lance. Number one, and I'll hold off on that. Let's move on.
Well,
I don't want to redo the entire webinar. Go ahead, Lance.
I'm sorry. One of the big underwriting considerations there, Bob, of course, 2020 was a tough year for a lot of small businesses. and you can do a 7A loan to an existing business that don't show debt coverage ability as long as you have projections for 2 years that are reasonable, supported by assumptions. And, the COVID questions are there that need to be included in underwriting. What was the impact on the cash flow of the business, and can they overcome it? What's their plan to overcome it?
Yeah, that's it. All right, since we're wasting, boy, that was a Freudian slip. Since we're spending time on this, Len, quick, you have a great take on whether we should process these loans CLP or GP. Excuse me, PLP or GP.
Well, on business acquisition loans, and this is true of most loans, if you as a good SBA citizen, good SBA lender, look at it and you have no issues saying that the loan is eligible, you can do it PLP. If you look at it and there's a particular area of eligibility that's questionable, that you're not 100% certain, that's when you submit it GP.
And that's predominantly what, Lance, affiliation issues?
It can be affiliation issues. It could be others, equity injection sources and the reliability of counting it as equity injection. It could be other things. But if you, as a participant lender, look at it and you're not 100% certain on the eligibility, submit it GP. But if you look at it and it's solid and you know it's eligible, PLP is the way to go.
Lance, we got this question, interesting question. There was a small franchise. I think there were 3 locations. It's not on the registry, but one of the owners was selling it. And the question we had was, can the new buyer buy that franchise? But we understand it's not a real franchise in terms of there's only 3 units. Can we just buy it as a standalone transaction, or is it ineligible because it's technically a franchise and not on the registry?
If it is a franchise and it's not on the registry, it's not going to be eligible.
The answer, yeah, and that's the correct answer. The answer, this came up a couple. The answer was you could try to do it and get it registered and do that, but you're the icebreaker in the North Pole, creating you're creating the wheel, and it can be done, but you may not want to choose going through the hoops. Katie, one more question. We want to know, with the 159 mandated to begin 2 days ago, are you having any issues? And Lance, you're saying hopefully we have 100% no.
Well, I think that everybody's accustomed to working in CAFS, and this new process is a change in how we do things, but it's, we all should feel comfortable. It's, if we follow the guidelines, and we'll talk about that next week, if you follow the guidelines on how to submit it, it looks to be a pretty seamless way to submit the 159s.
So yeah, some institutions are having issues, and Lance is there to solve that, offer a solution to the problem. Katie, what's going on? This came out this morning. SBA does a great job with respect to updating their FAQs. It's up to 30 pages. I know we put it on the PPP answer desk. Talk to me about what came out this morning.
Yeah, so if everybody's been following PPP, you've probably noticed that the SBA comes out with FAQ sheets every once in a while. This particular one only added 1 FAQ, so luckily you don't have to go through and read the whole thing. If you want to skip to the end, it's just 1. This one clarifies really what to do if you have a potential borrower who has a bankruptcy. And what it's really addressing is we all know that you cannot do a loan to a borrower who is presently involved in any bankruptcy. And what this FAQ does is it essentially defines what presently involved in bankruptcy means. And it essentially is saying that they're considered that if it hasn't been discharged yet. The other thing it addresses toward the end there is that if the borrower is permanently closed due to a bankruptcy, they are also ineligible in that case as well.
Katie, Lance, Ronald asked us, what if the owner is involved with a personal bankruptcy?
Well, that's a great question, Ronald, because These rules are centered around the business, the applicant, but it says if the applicant or owner has filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and that's what catches the individual owner. If they filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, it would not be eligible.
What happens if there's a bankruptcy in the history of that owner? How many years do we need to go back before we want to consider the application?
Well, as long as it's been, according to this, as long as it's been discharged, they would be eligible.
What if it's not discharged?
Not eligible.
Simple enough. Very good, Katie. What's going on with PPP funding? We're following that, and now there's some wrinkles. What are the trade groups discussing?
Yeah, so this is just a little more insight to what we were discussing yesterday on the show. As we were discussing, there's less than 70 billion. We're not sure the exact amount right now remaining in funds for PPP. Some trade groups have
Only
started
70
to
billion.
Yeah. Well, that'll go fast, and it has gone fast in the past. So it really depends on the appetite for small businesses wanting this and things like that. And remember, there are a lot of small businesses that are still held up with hold codes that might be taking up a lot of those funds. We don't know exactly how much is left in that situation. But given how much money is left, certain trade groups and the Senate are starting to discuss whether we need to appropriate more funds in order to take it all the way through that deadline that's now set, the May deadline, or whether we should just allow it to run out early, in which case they haven't really discussed how that would be handled, but they probably do need to address that as well if that is their decision. Senate Small Business Chairman Ben Cardin says he's open to discussing more funding, but you're starting to see groups like National Federation of Independent Businesses and U.S. Chamber of Commerce saying they would rather focus on different programs and stop focusing so much on PPP.
Do we know what those different programs are, Katie?
They haven't really addressed any specific programs yet. They're just saying maybe shift away from PPP, start addressing the issue in a different way. They haven't addressed exactly how they want to do that yet.
Well, we'll stay on top of this. I'm very interested in that. Obviously, every trade organization has their own different emphasis. NFIB has been pretty consistent, so let's do a little bit more research in terms of what is their alternative on what they want to do. I suspect it has to do with shuttered venue, with the restaurant grants.
Yep.
We want to see what's coming out of that. Let's see. SBA extends COVID-19 underwriting guidance for SBA loans. Lance, I'm going to toss this one to you. California is going green. We're going to be open. Skies are clearing. We're back to normal June 15th, so saith. Do I still need to address COVID-19 if I'm an underwriting California business? Because come June 15th, the waters are going to part. We're good to go.
Bob, the area I'm operating in is at 100% capacity, no mask now. But we still, in underwriting an SBA loan, have to address the COVID issues that SBA requires. So even with mandates and requirements being lifted, with capacities being increased, it doesn't mean that you can just skip the COVID questions. You still need to collect. A lot of institutions have created a COVID questionnaire for their borrowers, but you still have to address those issues in your credit memo. And your response might be restrictions have been lifted, business is back to normal. That could be the response, but you still...
Well, that is a response, yes.
Yeah, until SBA says, no, you don't have to address this anymore, you still need to be addressing this information in your credit memo.
Yeah, and you want to do that because if there's another surge and we have a close down and there's an early default, and Lance was talking about, we don't yet know how we're going to count early defaults, that 18 months, there's 11, 12 payments, et cetera. But it goes in Inspector General. they say, well, why'd you do that? Well, we addressed it. We thought everything was fine. And that, I think that's a valid argument as opposed to not addressing it at all. Yeah.
And Bob brought us up something that I've talked about a couple of times. Early default, of course, is defined as within 18 months of final disbursement or on a revolving line of credit within 18 months of the initial disbursement. How is SBA going to determine early default given the 11-12 payments that have been made for borrowers? Will those be looked at like a deferment and extend the early default period, or will they just be looked at like payments and not affect the early default period? That's kind of a burning question as we move in to the phase, Bob, where they're no longer receiving payments and we find out who's going to continue to stand after those 11-12 payments.
Yeah, again, write the credit memos assuming the worst is going to happen, that there is an early default, depends on how we do that. But I think there's nothing wrong with, because being prudent says, hey, everything I read, everything said we should be okay, and maybe address what happens if there's a surge, they've adapted, whatever, or they've been able to operate successfully through past surges, and if there's another issue, we feel they have the management capability and financial resources to stay in business. Russell has a unique problem. And he said this about 7 weeks ago, he submitted this and there was an error on the amount and they didn't request the full amount of forgiveness. What do we do? And
Bob, I haven't seen any information about how to resubmit and correct that. Russell, you probably get tired of me punning and saying, contact, you know, it's 4th and 21, Bob, and we're on the 5-yard line. Contact your local SBA Commercial Loan Servicing Center, and by local, there's 2 of them, one in Little Rock, one in Fresno, and just make them aware of, you know, give them the PPP loan number and tell them that forgiveness was submitted, the incorrect number was used. How do you fix that? And again, there are probably other places.
Yeah, just have to follow up on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And your district office also could be helpful in that matter.
Excellent. Excellent. By the way, Lance, that was a poor sports analogy. You're playing defense. The score is tied. You're in overtime, and your opponent brings the ball up with 2 seconds left and shoots from mid-court and sinks the 3. So my UCLA friends.
Sounds like Gonzaga to me.
Yeah, my UCLA friends, I'm a little empathetic. Well, not really. Okay. Christian says, how does SBA define owner-occupied? Does this mean hands-on, or can you hire a manager that will be running the day-to-day operations?
Of course, owner-occupied is talking about a piece of real estate, which means that in SBA lending, your operating company needs to occupy at least 51% of the property in order to be considered owner-occupied. There are a number of SBA loans that are made to borrowers who do have a manager that operates the business on a day-to-day basis. So I don't really see a problem with that. But one thing I want to share with you, Christian, the concept of a key employee. You have to get SBA Form 1919 on owners over 20%, but you also have to get the 1919 on key employees. And if someone takes care of day-to-day operations, they would be considered a key employee. So yes, it can be done, but yes, you have to collect a 1919 on that individual just like you would the owners.
And when do we need a guarantee from that key employee?
Not very often, Bob, but you know, if I look in the day-to-day key operating employee has a huge financial statement, I might be asking.
Well, the lender certainly does.
In most circumstances, the answer is you don't have to get a guarantee. But if there is a key employee, say, I own a business and Katie operates it for me. I own 100% of the stock. You can do the SBA loan with my guarantee, but you're still going to have to collect the 1919 in that circumstance on Katie to identify that key employee.
Where I'm steering you, Lance, is talk to me about very quickly about alien residents who can get the loan, but you need to have, they're able to get the loan, but if they have a key employee, then we need to do some additional documentation.
Yes, yes.
Raymond says, by the way, Michelle says she had the same issue. The portal said they are putting the procedures in place. This was 2 weeks ago. Nothing new yet. I think Russell said the same thing. So we know SBA is working on it. Russell, you're not alone. You're not alone. Thank you for that, Michelle. Last question. If we can decide, we have submitted a loan necessity questionnaire. However, the status has not changed, remains lender additional info needed. There does not appear to be any request for additional information. We have a glitch, obviously, in the transaction. What do we do?
I'm going to submit a request to the PPP answer email and just ask them, because what this appears to me, Raymond, and I could be way off base because I'm not submitting forgiveness applications on a daily basis, but it tells me that they probably have not reviewed the information that's been submitted yet.
Also, be interested to know what the dollar amount is on this, Raymond, as well.
I would too, Raymond. Absolutely.
Yeah, that could be. Well, very good. Katie, good job. Lance, thank you very much. Tomorrow we have John Riosti. We're still waiting for guidance. Katie, where's our guidance on restaurants and 504 refinance?
Well, I think you can get a little bit of info about restaurants now on the SBA website. Not a whole lot, but I think they have a video for the small business borrower, or I guess in this case it's a grant. So for the small business owner, if they are anticipating doing that, but we still don't have all the details about that yet. And 504, I don't know what to tell you. I'm still waiting to.
And finally, 159, obviously, Lance, we're going to redo the entire 159, make sure we understand agents, payments, documentation is still huge. There is a change of how to do that. We'll be doing that next Tuesday. Well, very good. Got some late questions. We'll go ahead and address those tomorrow. And thank you for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a great day.